My boss is usually great, but once a month, things get a little hairy. Part 1. Gerald Bishop was the doctor you called when you needed immediate medical attention but didn't want to go to the hospital. It's not that Gerald had failed out of medical school or had botched up a surgery or something like that. Gerald was quite a capable and sober doctor. It's just that years ago he had met somebody who presented an opportunity to him, and the money was quite good. He could make more in 3 nights than he could an entire year if he'd kept his old job at the hospital. I was Gerald's assistant. If the phone rang, it meant that somebody with a lot of money was in trouble. We had a few different houses that we preferred to work out of, but we were also willing to travel. There was a decommissioned ambulance for local trips, and Gerald's airplane for long-distance trips. All travel expenses, naturally, were reimbursed. We didn't discriminate. If somebody came in with a gunshot wound, we didn't ask where it came from, except to get a clearer picture of how best to treat it. If a celebrity came in with something jammed up his rectum, and that happened more than once, we got it unstuck and sent him on his way. We were on call 24/7, though mostly we worked in the dead of night, and there were only 12 nights out of the 365 where we weren't on call. Any other night was fair game. It didn't matter if it were Christmas or if Gerald were in Europe on vacation with his family. Sometimes I'd have to treat the clients myself while he walked me through it over video chat. But we always answered the call. Except for those 12 nights. Those nights were the full moons, and we couldn't answer any calls because I was watching over Gerald and his wife in their basement, where they were bound in silver chains because they were werewolves. They could control their urges most any other time, except when the moon was full. Then, they would send their 2 kids to a sitter and call me over. I'd come over with the gun loaded with silver bullets in it they had given me. If one of us gets out, shoot us, Gerald told me on that first horrifying night. If you can, shoot to wound. If you can't, shoot to kill. It's okay, William. It's the agreement that Mary and I came to. Then I'd chain them up. The transformation was hideous. Bones shifted under the flesh as the bishops writhed around in seemingly unbearable pain. It was as though an invisible force were pulling their faces away, contorting the nose and mouth into a snout. I watched their teeth clatter to the floor as sharp fangs poked their way through bloody gums. Hair sprouted all over as body parts stretched and pulled in a ballet of horror. Instinctively, I pulled the trigger of the gun the first time I witnessed it. The safety catch was engaged, so no bullets came forth. The transformation took less than a minute, but would haunt my nightmares for months, as would the rest of that night. Eventually, as with most horrors, I would grow used to it, but not for a long time. I sat in a chair in the opposite corner of the basement, near the stairs, and watched the bishops all night as they raged against their chains, howling in pain each time the silver dug in. I prayed the whole time that the chains wouldn't break loose. If they did, I knew that I would likely be dead, silver bullet or not. The night seemed endless, but at long last it did end. As the first hints of dawn crept in through the daylight windows, the beasts bent down, scooped up their human teeth, and swallowed them. As their bodies underwent another painful transformation, they slumped to the ground and lost all consciousness. It was during this routine, the night of a full moon, when our business line rang and I declined to answer it. It was the first time that anybody had actually tried to call it during a full moon, as we spread news of our night off throughout our networks of clientele well in advance each month. The phone kept ringing. I pulled it out of my pocket and looked at it quickly as the 2 beasts raged and howled on the other side of the basement. The call was from Salvatore Sartori, a man who was almost certainly a mob boss. I declined the call and set the phone to do not disturb as Gerald gnashed his wolf fangs. The next day, we were informed that Salvatore's son had been shot in the stomach and was bleeding out when he'd called us. We could have probably saved him, but we didn't, and he died. A few days later, we got a call from Candice Hart while we were on the golf course. She was an assassin for hire, and we had treated Candice and her friends for various wounds over the years. When she called that day, she sounded hysterical. "Candice," I said, "slow down. You're not making sense." "A fucking werewolf got Melissa," she said breathlessly. "Ripped her fucking guts out." Werewolf?" I asked. Gerald looked at me with a frown. "Look, whatever's going on, can you meet us at the spot in 15 minutes? "I'm already there," said Candice. "Fucking hurry." Then she hung up. "Did she say something about a werewolf?" asked Gerald, throwing his 9-iron into the bag and getting in the golf cart. "She did. She said it eviscerated her partner." "Is that even possible during the day?" "It is," said Gerald. "Call her back and tell her to meet us at the other spot." "But that's a half hour away from where she is now," I said. "If the attack happened near where they are, and it probably did if her partner is still alive after getting gutted, then the wolf is probably close by. By the time we get there, we may have company. So the first priority is to get them further away. It also gives us time to prepare for them. No time will be lost in the end." I called Candice back and told her the new plan. She wasn't happy about it, but agreed. 15 minutes later, Gerald and I were at one of our houses prepping for surgery. "You have the gun, I assume?" asked Gerald. He had ordered me to always carry the gun with the silver bullets in it in case he turned unexpectedly. I nodded. "Better give it to me," said Gerald. "I have a bit of experience here, sadly." I pulled the gun out of my travel bag and handed it over. He tucked it into the back of his waistband. After we had the basics set up, we went outside with the stretcher and waited. Soon, we saw Candice's car come tearing down the long dirt driveway surrounded by trees. She pulled onto the lawn, right in front of the door to the house, and jumped out of the car. "Jesus fuck, help her," she shouted. She looked shaken, more shaken than the time she'd driven herself to our house with a bullet wound in her chest. She jerked open the rear door to her car. I looked inside and saw that Candice's account of Melissa's condition had been accurate. Melissa was moaning in shock, manually holding her entrails inside her opened-up abdomen. The three of us lifted her carefully onto the stretcher and carried her inside. "What happened?" asked Gerald. "It was a fucking werewolf," said Candice. "Werewolves aren't real," said Gerald. We set Melissa on the operating table. I strapped her down and then injected her with the anesthetic. "Look," said Candice, "we were hired for a hit. They didn't give us any intel on the targets beyond an address and photos. Just said it had to be done today. For big money. So against my better judgment due to Melissa's urging, I agreed. So we get there and take out 2 of the targets. No problem. But the third target, she turned into a fucking werewolf right in front of us. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. And she did this." Candice pointed to Melissa's prone body. "Is Melissa? Is she gonna make it?" Gerald reached in and began rearranging Melissa's guts. "I don't suppose you know her blood type." "Of course I do," said Candice. "Do you think we're amateurs?" "It's AB." I went to the refrigerator, got a packet of AB, and began preparing the transfusion. "She might make it," said Gerald, shining a light inside of Melissa's abdomen. "Or she might not. You don't seriously expect us to believe that you saw an actual werewolf. This looks more like a clean wound from a very sharp blade of some kind. The organs are all intact." I was not experienced as Gerald was, but I could see that what he was saying wasn't true. It did indeed look like a wild animal had attacked Melissa. The cut itself was clean, but the organs had been mauled. "Look," whispered Candice, "believe me or don't believe me. Just get my baby fixed up, okay?" That's when we heard a banging coming from the back door. "Who the fuck is that?" cried Candice. "I was about to ask you the same thing," said Gerald. "Did somebody follow you here? The police, maybe? Were you speeding? Driving erratically?" "Again, I'm not a fucking amateur," said Candice. "Anyway, whoever it is, I'll take care of them." She pulled a gun out of her boot. "I'll do my job and you two do your jobs, right?" Before Gerald could answer, we heard a wild animal howl coming from just outside. I watched Candice as all of the color drained from her face and was replaced by a look of pure terror. "It's here," she whispered. Gerald rubbed his temples as the banging resumed. accompanied now by a series of low growls. Then he pulled the gun out from behind his back. We heard the sound of the door splintering apart and something stepping inside. I panicked and grabbed a scalpel, though I knew it'd be useless. Only the silver bullets in Gerald's gun would do any good against a werewolf. I forced myself to breathe as Candice and Gerald lifted their guns and pointed them at the doorway to the room. "Shooting them doesn't work," whispered Candice. "Not even a headshot. It's a fucking werewolf. Told you it was." I heard the sound of claws scraping against the hardwood floors getting closer. I thought briefly about injecting myself with morphine, just so that my death would be less painful. No, I tried to convince myself. It's okay. Gerald's one of them. He can handle this. But when I looked at Gerald, he looked far from confident, more composed than Candice, or what I imagined I myself looked like, but not calm. And Gerald was always calm. Even the day he had handed me the gun for the first time and told me to shoot the wolf version of him should it escape from the chains. The wolf was just around the corner, and then before I could process what was happening, I saw it in the doorway, a flurry of hair and claws leaping through the air at us, howling. I closed my eyes in preparation for death and heard 2 gunshots ring out. When I didn't die, I opened my eyes. The wolf was on the ground, bleeding out from the center of its head. "My God," I heard Gerald say. "What have I done?" That was... The wolf twitched once and then stopped moving. Once it was dead, it began to transform back into human form. From where I was, I could only see the back of the head, but I saw that it was a woman. Candice was standing closer. "Yep," she said. "That's the bitch we were supposed to kill. We got her kids, but then she turned into a fucking werewolf. But it looks like we finally got her. So do you guys believe me now? And can you fix Melissa?" I took a few steps closer and looked down at the dead body. It was Mary Bishop, Gerald's wife. The end of part 1. Please click the like button and leave a comment for the link to part 2. Thank you for listening and delving into the dark with me. I would be so grateful if you please click the thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a comment. The more engagement this video gets, the more YouTube will push my content to others, and thus our twisted little community will grow. All stories read on this channel will be available on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and many other podcast apps. Links are in the description. Thank you again for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you.